I mean, what's the point? One thing that's damning. I'll just say this real quick. One thing that's damning about the hearings today is that the pro se defendants, whatever you might think of them, did better than most of the lawyers. Do you agree?
This is I Don't Speak German. I'm Jack Graham, he, him, and in this podcast I talk to my friend Daniel Harper, also he, him, who spent years tracking the far right in their safe spaces. In this show we talk about them and about the wider reactionary forces feeding them and feeding off them. Be warned, this is difficult subject matter. Content warnings always apply. So this is episode 96, and for us, for me, it's like a minute until the clock ticks over to Halloween. In a minute, it'll be the 31st of October for me. I don't know where you are. I can never remember if you're ahead of me or behind me. You're ahead of me, aren't you?
I'm behind you. I'm behind you. Yeah, I'm 5 hours behind you.
50-50 chance, so obviously I went for the wrong one. Yeah. So I got to Halloween ahead of you. Yeah.
You did. Happens every year.
Yeah. So Halloween.
But this time tomorrow, when you're exiting Halloween, I'll still have several hours of it to enjoy. So
yeah, bastard. And of course, our clocks go back tonight. Well, in the morning, I should say.
Right.
Because British summertime ends in the morning of the 31st. So, yeah.
Ours is a week away, so we will be 6 hours apart, I think, instead of 5. For a week. Yeah. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I don't know when you, dear listener, will be hearing this. But either way, have a happy and safe and prosperous Samhain. Halloween, however you conceptualize it, or I hope you had one if you're getting this well after it's all over. Either way, a nice late October, early November to you, dear listeners. This is episode 96, and this one is called Catching Up with Cantwell. And wow, I'm so excited. And I just not nearly as excited as I am, because
I'm about to lose control, and I think I like it.
Last time we recorded, I mentioned,
faint memory.
I was like, I'm really tired of reading scientific papers and other academic and pseudo-academic papers for this project. Well, yeah. This episode is all about reading trial transcripts and legal filings, and I am not a lawyer, and also long Twitter threads of people saying incredibly awful things. This is
a case of be careful what you wish for, because you said you were sick of reading scientific papers. So what life served you up was the opportunity to read an awful lot of incredibly stupid bullshit.
Indeed. Much of it handwritten. We will get into that. So
this is of course the Sainz v. Kessler civil court case is finally underway, and Mr. Cantwell is one of the defendants. Tell us what's happening. Tell us why we're doing this.
Well, Sainz v. Kessler is a civil case. Now, we have spent a lot of time. So this is not going to be our Sainz v. Kessler episode, although we will kind of cover some of that. This case started, this is the 31st or the 30th or 31st. We're recording this. We have had 1 week of this case. It is expected to last for 4 weeks. If you want the ins and outs in excruciating detail, you should go follow Molly Conger, aka Socialist Dog Bomb, on Twitter. She is,
which frankly, why aren't you doing that already?
I can't imagine there's anyone listening to this podcast who is not aware. You're either following her or you have chosen not to for whatever reason. I don't know why you would choose to, but it does happen, and she does block people. But whatever. She has has been going through. She's basically spending 14-hour days listening to this case live. You're not allowed to record or rebroadcast, but you can call in to the courtroom of the judge and listen live to what's going on, and then live tweeting that experience. And she has been going through these documents for the 4 years this case has been pending. And then at night, she does a live Twitch stream from 8:30 to 9:30, kind of just talking to a chat and answering questions about what happened that day. And so she will be doing this. She will be doing this for the next month.
She must be. I can't imagine being as over anything as she must be over this, and yet she carries on.
And yet this is I won't speak for her obviously, but she got into this because of Unite the Right, and this is definitely a passion project, and we have enormous. I have so much respect for her and what she's done over this time. So
absolutely, yeah.
Science v. Kessler, just to kind of get us into the headspace here, is it is a civil, not criminal case. Mm-hmm. So no one is facing.
Even so, the Law and Order donk is going to be all over this fucking episode. I hope you realize that.
Yeah, just trying not to get us copyright strike. But so so Science v. Kessler is a civil case. Not a legal case. No one is being threatened to go to jail over this. This is for monetary damages. It is essentially alleging what's called a Section 1985 in the Virginia Code conspiracy to deprive certain individuals of their civil rights, et cetera, et cetera. This is a fairly novel way of kind of going about this, from what I understand. But they're trying to make this a landmark case in order to kind of go after these kinds of white nationalist, far right, violent organizations, and the kind of the people that fund them, the kind of ideological leaders, kind of like make this sort of a test case for how this can work. The lawyers involved in this case have spent 4 years collecting a whole lot of evidence in favor of the conspiracy charge that they have put forward. I shouldn't say they have done it. They have taken the work of hundreds of anonymous anti-fascists who have painstakingly collected that evidence and provided it to the lawyers. But the lawyers have done enormous amount of work. But there is a lot when the lawyers are saying like, oh yes, and we served an enormous victory in the dirty anti-fascists. We just don't talk too much about those people. You do get a certain vibe from time to time, and so however much we appreciate the lawsuit and its possible positive effects on the world, it'd be nice to get a little bit more acknowledgement to the people who actually did a lot of the groundwork on this. So anyway. Just saying that out loud here. So again, we are not going to be talking kind of in detail about Science v. Kessler, about like all the ins and outs of it. I think we will do something at the end and kind of like sum it up and kind of talk about kind of the larger issues once we get to the end of the story. But our good, very dear friend Christopher Cantwell has been making a complete ass out of himself. And when I say dear friend, for any new listeners, that is said with significant irony, just to be clear.
There's a degree of sarcasm in play there, I have to say.
He is a despicable human being, among the worst of the Nazis that we've covered on this show. But because he has the enormous talent of sticking his foot up his own ass, or sticking his head up his own ass, on a regular basis, he ends up being a comic figure for us. So I can't remember the last kind of big Christopher Cantwell update we did. We've been trying to kind of stick Cantwell news segments in as we go along, but especially over this summer, like a lot's been happening outside of the Cantwell stuff. And so I think the last time we really covered him in a real way was right after he was arrested on his criminal case.
Well, we did a big episode with Hillary Sargent, didn't we?
Yes. Right. Yeah. So the last episode that we did, and in fact, I've included a link to Hillary's writing over at The Informant that she wrote about that trial, about his criminal trial. Mm-hmm. So in the time that I've been tracking Cantwell, he had criminal charges relating to the actual events at Unite the Right on August 11th, the night before, at the church rally where he assaulted some people. Friends of the show, previous guests, Christopher Goad and Emily Garcinski. So he has criminal charges there. He sued them, and they countersued over matters relating to, like, he claimed that they had perjured themselves, which they didn't, but all that got kind of swept away eventually. He also is currently incarcerated because he has he threatened to rape the wife of a even worse Nazi than him. And during that entire time that I've been tracking him, or except for the first few months before Unite the Right, he has been subject to this civil lawsuit. And I think that's kind of where our story begins, is with the civil lawsuit. Is there anything you think we should say about Chris Cantwell before we kind of move forward on the ongoing saga of Chris Cantwell's fucking himself?
Well, if you want to, I mean, there's plenty of places you can go if you want to know more about Christopher Cantwell. But one place you could go is this very podcast, previous episodes. As I say, we did a big episode with Hillary Sargent. I believe that, I can't remember the number, but that episode is called The Trial of Christopher Cantwell. And we also, well, I mean, first of all, we covered the Unite the Right rally at Charlottesville, Virginia, the infamous rally, which is the wellspring of all of this, in episodes 3 and 4 of this podcast. And then we covered Christopher Cantwell, sort of an overview of his background, his origin story, if you know what I mean, as a world-class dicklord on the world stage in I believe episodes 5 and 6. But basically, if you go to the if you go to the IDSG site and you search Cantwell, then you will find the episodes, and that's a good grounding. I don't know, do we need to recap basically who he is? I mean, failed stand-up comedian, libertarian, Wally, becomes a Nazi via libertarianism and race realism and stuff like that. And
he radicalized by his audience, essentially, because he was in this kind of far right libertarian space. He was part of the Free Keene Project, the Free State Project. Excuse me. He moved to Keene, New Hampshire.
The Free State Project.
remember when that was like the terrible thing we were all worried? Remember when that was what like far right extremism looked like? Man, more comfortable times. Some of his former pals at the Free State Project are going to come back at the end of this episode, by the way.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. But he was a libertarian. He was this kind of like socially conservative, right-leaning libertarian. He is deeply substance abused. He is a habitual user of illicit substances. Raging alcoholic. He is. I hate to sort of blame anyone for substance dependency, but like he is really extreme on like every single measure. He is a deep narcissist. He had a really hard right persona that he did on his radio show. He has threatened several people I know personally in various ways.
As we said, he's in jail at the moment for threatening to rape the wife of. His defense in that trial, as I remember it, was that I didn't actually use the word rape. So in this scenario, she might have been into it, so it's fine.
Exactly.
That gives you a little cameo of the man's intellectual and moral caliber, I would say.
And so in a previous version of the Catching Up with Chris Cantwell episode that I was planning, I had put together the trial transcripts from that criminal case were finally released, and I had gone through them and kind of picked out choice bits that I was going to read. And there's a lot there because he did break down crying on the stand, which
that's another thing he's famous for. His nickname is the Crying Nazi. He is, if he's known for anything outside of the, the kind of circles that are going to be listening to this, he is known as the Crying Nazi. He is one of the guys who was at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, attacking people, pepper spraying. And of course, let's not forget, they're in the context of marching up and down, being a Nazi, who after that, he realizes that the police want to talk to him, for attacking people, etc. And he releases a video of himself sobbing about how what a sad, poor, persecuted little soldier he is.
Well, and the narrative, I mean, the real story there to that like Crying Nazi video was he was terrified that the police were going to harm him, were going to like kill him in apprehending him. And
that must be awful, living in fear of the police killing you while apprehending you. I mean, God, wouldn't it be terrible if there was like a large group of people who hadn't done anything wrong who had to think about that all the time?
And then he has been in and out of the prison system, the various parts of our prison industrial complex, off and on for most of the last 4 years. And another kind of recurring thing that we're going to be talking about in this episode is his sort of whining about the very real indignities that he has suffered and the very real civil rights violations that he has suffered in that. Of course, he never uses this as a way of like reflecting on the general condition of the prison industrial complex and like the way that is like deeply racially coded and the way that it is a form of white supremacy. That all of the things that we're going to say in terms of the indignities that he has, suffered, are very real and are the absolutely ordinary working state of that system. Like he is not being treated like especially badly by anyone here.
But he's
given
he gets
enormous leave. Right.
He gets no insight from any, empathy. What's that? I don't know. I mean, it's worth saying just briefly, I have empathy for people who have substance abuse problems, addiction problems. I have empathy for people who have personality disorders. And I intensely dislike the prison industrial complex and that entire system. I am ready to be empathic and empathetic to anybody who has those problems. The problem is that Christopher Cantwell is a vicious, vile Nazi piece of shit who attacks people and endangers people and abuses people for no reason other than that he hates them because he's a loathsome little bigot. So that kind of vitiates my sympathy,
Right. Exactly. Like we can acknowledge the kind of the real issues that are in the system and also say, Chris Cantwell, you are not the most sympathetic person to be discussing this. So one of the other things that we might know about him, kind of getting into this, is that he had a habit of podcasting from jail during his initial confinement after the Unite the Right rally, right after the Crying Nazi video was leaked. He started calling into various other kind of far-right figures and some friends of his, and they would record his phone calls, and he did a thing called Live from Seg. That's segregation. That's live, live from jail, essentially. And he was doing his radio show, shorter version of 30-minute, phone calls, as often as he possibly could, because he felt like this incarceration was a political tool meant to silence him, you see. And so he absolutely destroyed a lot of any kind of goodwill, any kind of goodwill or leniency that the attorneys in those cases were going to grant him, or the judges were going to grant him, because he was like actively violating court orders on his podcast. Constantly. One of the orders was that he was not allowed to mention Emily Gorsinski at all in any of his kind of communications, like not even reference vaguely, because he had harassed her so thoroughly. And then he would, of course, Emily is a trans woman, and he made a habit of misgendering her and just the most like juvenile, stupid of ways. So and he's doing all that and many other things live on his from jail. He's just podcasting from jail. Did not continue that procedure to such a degree after his arrest in January 2020 for the criminal charges of threatening his fellow Nazi's wife, but did occasionally call into his friend Jared Howell's show and have conversations about various kind of issues with being in jail and his current legal cases, et cetera.
We've done a Jared Howe episode as well. If you want to,
we haven't done a full Jared Howe episode. We've talked about him. We've talked about him a lot. Just because every time you mention Cantwell for the last 2 years, you're talking about Jared Howe to some degree. But we have not done a full Jared Howe episode.
Wow, I felt sure. I'm now hallucinating our back catalog.
We're nearing 100 episodes. I think it's like I can't remember all of them either. So sometimes I look back and go, "All right, we did that. That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Can't believe it." Well, one of the phone calls, one of the podcast products that he was trying to release in this way was originally just called Untitled Project that eventually got called Unlikely Allies, in which he was chatting with a man named Joe the Jew. And in case we haven't made this clear so far, Christopher Cantwell is a deeply, deeply anti-Semitic human being.
Rabidly, obsessively anti-Semitic. Yeah.
Yes. To like, this is not the kind of like subtle form of, blaming George Soros kind of anti-Semitic. This is like really, really overt. Hitler did nothing wrong.
Oh yeah.
Entertains Holocaust deniers. He literally recommended. Spoiler alert, he literally recommended that the jurors in his current trial read Mein Kampf if they are intellectually honest with themselves in the third sentence of his opening statements. So this is, when we call him a Nazi, he is an actual Nazi. It's fine.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, there is a well-known axiom, isn't there, in legal circles? The person who defends himself and mentions
comfy purring. I hear
in his opening statement has a fool for a client. That's a well-known. Yes, you can. I don't know. You might not be able to hear because weirdly it didn't come out on the last recording. But yes, you might possibly be able to hear very loud purring. Listening.
Sorry, I did get a bit of that comfy purring just very loudly in one of my ears just then. So hopefully the audience got it too. That'll be nice.
I hope so. It didn't come out last time, but I hope.
Again, yeah.
Say hello, Pocket. Say hello.
Anyway. There we go. Got that one. So 2 episodes of that podcast were eventually produced, but after the first episode was released, very shortly thereafter, Cantwell was moved from his current incarceration to a hardcore unit, to a communications unit. This is Communications Management Unit at USP Marion, one of only 3 CMUs in the country. This was on June 8th is when this kind of news came out. I've got a link to a tweet that Molly did at the time, which includes handwritten legal filings from Mr. Cantwell explaining where they can contact him now that he has been moved to this unit. Now, usually the people who end up in these kinds of, high security, like low communication units, is because they are, you end up with like mafia figures and kind of gang leaders who are thought to be able to, kind of communicate with their criminal activities outside the
really
prison,
big, big fish,
big kind of name
cannibal,
right?
Yeah, Hamburglar, yeah.
those kinds of figures. You also end up having
Waluigi, really bad guys.
But it turns out that a lot of the kind of very prominent Nazis kind of end up in these units as well. And the immediate thought that kind of everybody had, in my circles when this happened was either he was threatening somebody, which entirely possible, or somebody decided, no, you don't get to podcast from jail anymore. And that's kind of the upshot of it. He has argued at some length in various places where he is able to kind of argue this, that, I am speaking to the media. I mean, the media is his friend with the podcast, but I am speaking to the media. I have the right, according to, this set of guidelines and that I was given to me as a prisoner. I have a certain prisoner bill of rights. I am allowed to communicate to the media, which in this case is this guy with a podcast. If anyone who remembers, one of the biggest podcasts of all time, Serial, back in 2014, that first season, the problems with that Sarah Koenig had communicating with Adnan Syed, the problems of incarcerated people not being able to communicate with the outside world and not being able to talk about their conditions, the horrible conditions inside the prison, are completely legitimate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But most prisoners are not trying to record a Nazi podcast. No. From inside their incarceration unit. So he gets moved.
Atypical.
So he gets moved to Marion, Illinois. He had, I think there's one phone call which he managed to make, which Jared Howe released during the period that he was in Marion, Illinois. I mean, he described the conditions of like, there's literally someone with a finger on a button that will end this call immediately if I go outside like certain guidelines. And, it was very, very, circumscribed the ability that he had to communicate with the outside world. The other thing that this means is because he has been transferred back and forth to various prisons over the course of his incarceration, which is coming up on 2 years. It'll be 2 years in January. Is that he has all this legal documentation. He has all of the depositions, all the things for this civil trial, which has gone on to 1,350 documents or so as of the time we're recording. It is over 1,000 documents, like 1,300 and something documents. He had a bunch of that, paper copies of it or thumb drives or some kind of digital stuff that he was able to access and kind of use this to prepare his legal defense. Well, every time he gets moved, all that stuff has to be shipped to him, and that takes who the fuck knows how long that's going to take, because as we know in the prison system, you get moved, you get your stuff when they decide to give you your stuff. Again, completely ordinary torture given to absolutely every person in the U.S. prison industrial complex. Chris Cantwell is not being unfairly singled out in this case, and he shows no empathy towards anyone else in this process. It is all personally, it is a conspiracy by the U.S. government to come after him personally because of the strength of his political ideals. That's Chris Cantwell's perspective on this matter.
Yeah, no empathy, dawning, not even the faintest glimmer of a systemic analysis. Just it's a conspiracy to get me.
Right.
Basically, Christmas Eve, the three spirits, they could talk to this guy for 1,000 years. He'd never get it,
He would absolutely adore getting the chance to talk for 1,000 years.
He would.
Few people are more in love with the sound of their own voice.
The spirits of Christmas wouldn't get a word in edgeways.
It's Cantwellmas. Now, one of the things that happened while he was in Marion, because as I said, a whole lot of various Nazi figures are incarcerated there, and the prison system has this. It is a general strategy to kind of take all of the kind of people of a certain, like all the Nazis, just kind of get housed together so that they don't infect other inmates with their Nazi bullshit. This kind of routine. This happens a lot. And he met a couple of fairly prominent figures while he was incarcerated in Marion. And one of those people was Nathan Hale, who in the 90s was convicted of various crimes. We will probably do a Nathan Hale episode. He is the head of the World Church of the Creator, and the creativity movement is essentially a Nazi. It's not even Christianity. It is a really kind of bizarre offshoot religion, but it is an explicitly white supremacist, white nationalist religious faith. Nathan Hale, fun fact, was previously defended by a certain Glenn Greenwald in his who was a young lawyer in the 90s. One of his first big cases that kind of gave him a name was defending Matt Hale. And life goes in strange places, doesn't it? So he meets Nathan Hale, and also one of Nathan Hale's kind of like the second in command guy, a guy named Bill White. And I have a link to a story at Raw Story by Jordan Green, and I'm going to read a little bit of that. I'm going to read you a little bit of that now to kind of give you some background, because it turns out Nathan Hale and Bill White are men with a certain set of skills. While serving his sentence, Cantwell met Hale along with another man named William A. White, who has played an even more significant role in helping to prepare for his upcoming trial in Charlottesville. White, in turn, is imprisoned for soliciting violence against the foreman of the federal jury that convicted Hale. According to the U.S. Justice Department, White created the now defunct Overthrow.com website in the late 2000s as a platform for the American National Socialist Workers Party. He used the website to post derogatory comments and personal information about the jury foreman, including their home address and phone numbers. Anyway, so I run into these guys. Cantwell told a white supremacist podcaster during an interview last week from an Oklahoma prison where he is awaiting transfer to Charlottesville to stand trial. And allegations against him notwithstanding, they're good to me. So what's actually happening here is that White and Hale is a lawyer. Hale actually has a law degree. White does not, but has sort of trained himself. He's spent a lot of time in prison reading, legal library. They're giving him legal advice. They're helping him in his civil defense, right? Now, I feel like it's worth it at this point. I deeply apologize for this, but I do feel like it is now worth it to let you actually hear the voice of Christopher Cantwell, because Raw Story can run the actual text of what he said. We have the ability to play you the audio because it turned out I know exactly which podcast he called into. So let's hear this from the horse's mouth, how he describes this interaction. And this is like a minute or so taken out of a much longer thread, but this kind of gets at the meat of it. So, let's play this.
Yeah, Matt Hale is somebody you might have heard of. I recognized the name, and I didn't recognize his face at first. And I saw a picture of him from when he was younger. I was like, oh, shit, I do recognize you. Matt Hale's serving a 40-year sentence for allegedly soliciting the murder of a federal judge. Okay? And then there's another fellow in there by the name of Bill White. And Bill White is in there serving a 390-month sentence, in part for allegedly threatening or soliciting violence against one of Matt's jurors. Okay, so anyway, so I run into these guys, and allegations against them notwithstanding, they're good to me. And so Bill White and Matt actually made an attorney out of himself before he got arrested. And Bill White, I don't think he ever became a member of the bar, but has made very good use of his time reading the law library. And so Mr. White has been very helpful to me filing motions with the court, and that has the plaintiffs absolutely furious, and they decided to write this letter to the judge like complaining about this and saying that
he's defending himself. He's defending himself. Make this stop.
He's obviously ghostwriting for Mr. Cantwell, is what they said. And I've gotten opinions from several people that say there's actually nothing against. There's no rule against ghostwriting in a legal process, but even at that, it's a collaborative process.
That's not.
Could I do this without him? No.
That's
but
not it. So you're filing motions, and their complaint is that you didn't write them yourself.
All right. So that was Chris Cantwell and his best friend in the world, Jared Howe. I would say his only friend in the world, but I think he has 2 or 3 friends left. We're going to hear from another one of them here at the end of the episode. But
wow, that's a lot more than I was expecting.
So, what are we getting from this? So Cantwell meets this guy, Bill White, and Nathan Hale. White in particular appears to be essentially writing, the legal filings, or, at least kind of dictating them. And then Cantwell files them under his own name. Now, I did a little bit of looking into this to see what the actual sort of legal standard is. And again, I am not a lawyer. Do not this is not anything like legal advice. I have no fucking clue about this stuff. What I gathered is that there are differences of opinion about like how this can be done and what kinds of, kind of legal work you can, it's, like what the legal guidelines, what the ethical guidelines for lawyers will kind of allow one to do in this process. The idea is like kind of the issue of it is that, the within the legal system, there is this fiction that, we are all, rational actors. We are all like seeking the truth and, putting things on paper that are, held to the highest scrutiny of honesty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is, of course, nonsense. But like that is sort of the fiction, the fiction that they abide by in their kind of bylaws and such. The other issue is that Cantwell in this legal proceeding is given an enormous amount of leeway because he is a pro se defendant, because he is defending himself without the ability to use a lawyer. The reason he no longer has a lawyer is because he stopped paying people and because he is an absolutely toxic human being and no lawyer wants to defend him. But he is given a large amount of leeway, arguably more than he should be given for as a pro se defendant. Like, that's just kind of how it works. Like the legal system does sort of allow, look, we know you're not a lawyer. You don't know all this stuff the way we do. You're given some leniency on it. And by actually retaining the services of a lawyer, he is essentially taking advantage of that leniency while at the same time having legal support, which is not like declared in the paperwork, right? So I have linked to the Science v. Kessler. There are so if you want to go through and read all this for yourself, most of the documents in the Science v. Kessler lawsuit have been made public. There is a website called Court Listener where you can go in and buy individual documents, and there's a browser extension called Recap that you can install, and after you've paid for it, it becomes free for anyone to go down and look at those PDFs. So guess who has been paying for almost all of these documents? It's our friend Molly almost certainly has personally downloaded. I mean, like friends of this podcast, let's put it that way. So there's no guarantee that all of these are like a handful of people, but it is almost certainly true that I know for a fact that Molly has spent a great deal, like thousands of dollars over the years to make these documents available to people. So just be aware of that. There is a reason you can actually go and read most of these documents. It is because, again, dedicated anti-fascists want to make this information available to the public. And so anyway, you can go. I've linked to this before, and I'm going to kind of give you document numbers, which you can then go kind of find the individual documents. It's fairly straightforward. It takes some time to kind of learn how to kind of read the system and everything. But once you do kind of have that ability, you can kind of go find the documents pretty easily. So I'd like to read the initial complaint from the plaintiffs in which they are alleging this kind of what they call ghostwriting from Bill White to Cantwell. And
this is quite Halloween appropriate, ghostwriting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is from document 1108, and I've linked to it in the show notes. In addition, it has now become apparent that Cantwell, who has been proceeding pro se and has been afforded its corresponding protections and leniency, may be using another inmate, William White, to participate in this litigation and ghostwrite his recent filings. And then it has some. I'm going to eliminate all the kind of legalese and the references, etc. But that provides yet another basis to deny these motions. Ghostwriting plainly violates legal rules and only reinforces the inappropriate and harassing nature of Cantwell's numerous recent filings. So part of their argument is that Cantwell, not just he was having somebody was kind of ghostwriting for him, but he was suddenly posting, in some cases, dozens of filings on a single day, which are clearly to kind of waste the plaintiff's time responding to all of them, right? Yeah. Because they are kind of clearly frivolous and nonsense. And your time to, kind of make that claim was 2 years ago when you weren't fucking paying attention to this case, Chris, which he admitted he thought this case was so frivolous and he would never have to really respond to it, that it would just get dismissed on a single look. So, anyway, he spent years just not giving a shit about this case. Yeah, I think. I put there's more kind of legalese in the show notes, but I think that's it's really just I've kind of given you the basis of it, right? They come back in documents 1134 and 1185, essentially alleging the same thing. This is kind of a continuing argument. So yeah, go ahead. What were you?
So far from it being, how dare he merely defend himself? He's not allowed to do that. We're supposed to win by default. The evil Chris Cantwell is supposed to be told, you're not allowed to even fight back. What's actually being said is he's getting all the benefits of being a pro se defendant, and he's cheating because he's got legal advice. He's got legal help from somebody who is actually qualified. Yeah.
Right. And William White is apparently not actually a lawyer, from what I understand, but someone who is not putting his name to these legal documents as well. Right.
Okay.
And
not
so
qualified then, but with some training.
Probably qualified in the sense of, doesn't have the official education, but someone who knows his way around a legal filing, someone who's spent an amateur, but hasn't been to law school effectively, but knows his stuff because it's been around for decades. Yeah.
Even so, this is not pro se, is it?
Right. And look, the argument again, this gets into some messy questions, right? About what are the guidelines for this, and how I think a pro se defendant should be. There's what's the line between asking your buddy down in the jail cell next door what they think about a certain robbery case or whatever, and soliciting the help of a professional lawyer and going as a pro se defendant. These are messy issues, right?
But if this guy's actually writing his motions for him,
right? And I think there's an open question as to how much of this is actually written by Bill White. One of the things that kind of comes across is that for a long time, Cantwell was writing everything, handwriting everything, and then suddenly he's does his motions that are all with a typewriter. And so is Chris Cantwell typing this, or is this being kind of typed by someone else? Is it in his voice? And again, there's a lot of messiness here, and I'm not trying to bend over backwards to defend Cantwell in the sense of I want to play devil's advocate. Believe me, I have absolutely no respect for Cantwell whatsoever. There's no question there, but I am acknowledging the complexity of the larger question, right? And saying I'm not going to be kind of 100% on the fuck Cantwell because fuck Cantwell. I'm just acknowledging that there is some gray area here. And ultimately, the judge kind of ruled against Cantwell in this, and he's said you're not allowed to do this anymore. How that overall issue kind of gets decided in 10 or 20 years, no clue. But apparently there is a debate on it. So that's that. He's on his own. He's there was some kind of legal question about whether he was going to be able to be transported to Charlottesville to actually stand trial in person. He pushed for that. He wanted to be in the courtroom. Many of the other defendants have chosen to do their work by Zoom, even those who are not actively incarcerated. But Cantwell wanted to be there. He wanted to be able to show up and be his full self in court. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
Because that'll help.
That's going to really help, But I can also kind of understand being a pro se litigant and then having to do the entire trial by Zoom. Another legitimate hardship there, is a kind of a legal matter and a fairness matter, for sure. So as the kind of the last days before the before the beginning of the trial move forward, and as we kind of get closer to the trial, he starts filing ever more plaintive requests for how unfair this process has been to him all along, and he has fully believed that. This is something that he has maintained from the beginning. But I have included.
Look, this man's, absolute belief that he is the ultimate victim, that he's always the victim. That is the cornerstone of his psyche. Any situation, he is being unfairly treated.
Exactly. But I have included a link to a few documents here, which sort of, give you the sense of like the way he's, and this is what I find interesting, because what you get the closer he gets to trial and the more sort of unprepared he is to even understand the legal issues involved here, the more these legal filings start to read like they're not really written for the judge. They're not really written for trial. They're not making legal arguments. They sound like Chris Cantwell prepping the radical agenda, prepping his podcast. They sound like him talking to, like, it's like he imagines this kind of future in which he is like vindicated as being this kind of like, destroyed political figure, writing from prison, communicating in any way he can through these legal filings in the hopes that someone will see, how tortured he has been by this process the whole time.
This sounds oddly familiar to anybody. Anybody who knows anything about.
There was another man who spent a little bit of time in prison for for some petty stuff. And went on.
Who did a lot of speechifying in court about how history would vindicate him, and he'd been unfairly treated, etc.
Talked about the struggles that he had.
His struggles,
his particular struggles. Yes, a noted 20th century politician, as I believe Chris Cantwell.
A World War II hero, as I believe Tim Pool once referred to him.
Oh God, I don't remember. Okay, we'll see.
Bookmark that and
bookmark that. But all right. So I spent a lot of time reading these handwritten, notes, handwritten things over the course of the last week or so.
I'm so sorry.
I find it like strangely fascinating, right? Because again, like one of the things that he runs into is that, he has to write this filing, right? He has to file this paperwork. And in order he can't use a typewriter, because in order to use a typewriter, you have to have like a typewriter wheel or whatever. And you have to be able, and you can buy those from the commissary in the jail or in the prison, but they were out of stock. And so they're just out of stock. And so he can't type it. So he has to write it. But he can't write it because he doesn't have a piece of paper. He has to literally borrow individual pieces of paper. And then he doesn't even have a pencil. So he's literally writing these in like the golf pencils they sell him, and, like scribbling them out on, in some cases, unlined paper. At one point, he's literally using the reverse side of the documents he is being served with, that he is given in the trial. He's just using the reverse side and like scribbling his responses on the back side. And like at one point he literally has to say, disregard reverse side. This is, this is the only paper I have. I mean, there is a real like, there's a real like bathos here, right? In terms of, but again, this is every single incarcerated defendant. This is completely ordinary. This is what the system does. Right.
Yeah. And to be clear, I have zero sympathy with this man, but I would be prepared for him to benefit from the system as a whole becoming fair to everybody.
If he became like the case study in like how terrible the system is to everyone, and suddenly that led to like people realizing, hey, maybe we should actually improve this process somewhat. Great. I am 100% on board with I agree with you completely on that. So, this leads to now one of the things that he's been kind of crying for months in his legal filings is he wants to continue the case. He does not want to. He can't prepare while in prison because he's not given access to the materials that he needs to make his case. Again, he has a completely legitimate claim on that. He has argued, no, we just continue this until after I am out of prison, until after I'm at least in a halfway house. I'm on probation, but I can live somewhere and I can have all my documents, and I'm not actually, in this situation where I just have no resources available to me to fight this. The plaintiffs have, batted that down. The judge has batted that down over and over and over again. He has again, I think there are like at least a dozen court documents that he has produced, like asking for this in various forms. during the pretrial conference with Cantwell sort of present and making objections and talking about this very loudly in front of the judge in person for the first time, suddenly the plaintiffs put out a little document there, actually requesting for a continuance just for Cantwell. They want to sever the case and let Cantwell do the rest of the case with the other defendants, the other dozen or so defendants, and then have Cantwell's trial at a later date after he's gotten out of prison. And they literally put out this document the Saturday before the case is supposed to begin on Monday. Let me read the reasoning to you. This is part of the document. This is document 1306. While plaintiffs remain adamant that any further delay would be extremely prejudicial given the fact that this case was filed 4 years ago, jury questionnaires have already been sent out, and many parties, counsel, and witnesses are already in or on their way to Charlottesville, CEG, plaintiffs are also aware that Mr. Cantwell likely will continue to assert these arguments, which could complicate the issues on appeal. As a result, plaintiffs have concluded that the best way to resolve this tension between the need to proceed to trial and Mr. Cantwell's due process arguments would be for the court to sever plaintiffs' claims against Mr. Cantwell from their claims against the other defendants in this case for a separate trial pursuant to Rule 42 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. In other words, Cantwell is actually going to damage our case by his due process claims, legitimate or not. But by having these claims, he's actually going to make it more likely that everyone in this process is going to get to appeal and just fuck up the whole situation for everybody.
Yeah,
that's what Cantwell is doing. He is being, and again, whatever you feel about whether his claims are legitimate or not, I have my own feelings about that, but he is basically trying to wreck this entire process. The system itself is so broken that the claims that Cantwell is making actually have effects on the entire nature of this trial and whether Cantwell is actually going to whether the other defendants are going to get to appeal this, whatever the judgment is that the jury sets down. So the plaintiffs at the last minute decide let's sever Cantwell, let's do him later and do everyone else at the same time. Now guess how the other defendants responded to this.
I don't know. If I was on trial and I was connected in any way to Christopher Cantwell, I would be very keen to be severed from him. But who the fuck knows?
They were thoroughly against the idea of severing trial at this point. Right. And so this is from Kolanich, who is on behalf of Jason Kessler, Nathan D'Amigo, and Identity Europa. This is document 1307. The court has been aware of Mr. Cantwell's objections since at least April 2021. The plaintiffs have been opposing Cantwell and not caring about his allegations of procedural or substantive rights for at least that long. And then it's got a couple of notes here. Defendants object to the court flip-flopping on its Cantwell rulings at the mere letter-based request of the plaintiffs less than 48 hours before trial. The defendants have invested considerable time and expense into preparing a defense strategy that assumes the presence of Mr. Cantwell as a party defendant at trial. One more. This is from document 1309.
Hang on a minute. Does their defense hinge upon blaming him for everything?
It is entirely possible. We will find out. Document 1309. This is Smith. This is actually the one actual professional lawyer, a not movement-based lawyer. This is someone they just hired. And this is on behalf of Matt Parrott, Matthew Heimbach, and the Traditionalist Workers Party. Plaintiffs' counsel want to take a mulligan here because prior to Friday's final pretrial conference, they had their army of jury consultants analyze the jury questionnaires and concluded rightly that they have very little chance of winning their case in front of the eventual jury, even with adverse inferences. That's another fascinating thing that's going on with this case. We will cover it in the future. In order to manufacture a basis for their mulligan, they've been intentionally not caring about Mr. Cantwell's situation, which they've known about for many months now. That way, if they drew an unfavorable jury pool, they could fake a sudden onset of empathy and concern for Mr. Cantwell's predicament and bait the court into postponing the trial with their ridiculous 2 Charlottesville trials, i.e. the regular one and then some kind of Cantwell-only mini trial a couple of years from now proposal. In other words, now that the plaintiffs see the jury is going to find against them, they're now very concerned about Mr. Cantwell's issues and that they've been ignoring for 14 months. Yeah, that I don't think that's what's going on here. That doesn't seem likely to be. But what do I know? I'm not a lawyer, so. But that's what the other defendants had to say. And Cantwell, again, who has been asking for months to continue this trial, to not be that it be delayed. Once it was actually put to him, like, what does he prefer to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was actually sort of left up to him. Like, do you want to continue this way, or do you want to continue this trial, or do you want to do it now? He decided to stick with the current case. And so everybody flip-flopped at the last minute. It's kind of fascinating, right? My guess is that someone actually had a reasonable conversation with Chris Cantwell and said, if you do this now, you will have actual lawyers at least at the table. You will have some kind of legal advice to rely on. If you do this alone, you are going to be even more completely fucked than you already are. That would be kind of my guess. Although it may just be sheer cussedness that suddenly the plaintiffs wanted him to, he may have just flip-flopped on that basis. Like, no, if they want this now, I'm not listening to them. No, we're going to do it now. That's, who knows? It was a weird couple of days. Let's put it that way.
It is entirely possible that the theory behind Mr. Cantwell's decisions is I find out what they want and I do the opposite because they're bad.
Exactly. So in the it's just worth kind of giving you a little bit more of the flavor of some of these handwritten documents here in the process of kind of this motion kind of proceeding. Someone actually had to give Cantwell the information. They had to either deliver a letter to him, which is difficult to do, late at night in the prison system, or someone had to call him and read him the actual motion. Okay. So one of the plaintiff's attorneys, last name Block, got that unfortunate duty. And this is from Cantwell's filing. This is from a document 1314, so close to 1312. Anyway, a phone did not become available until after court cleared at 6:30 p.m., at which point I called Miss Carlson. Michael Block answered the phone. Mr. Block asked me if I had seen either of the letters he had filed with the court that day. This is, all of these sentences are like numbered as a legal filing. This is the whole of number 7. Amused, I replied in the negative. 8. Mr. Block offered to read the amended letter out loud to me over the phone. He did so and paused to let me note the case number cited. 9. Mr. Block then read to me Mr. Kolinich's response, again pausing as I could note citations. 10. I thanked Mr. Block for providing me with this information, and we ended the call with a joke and a chuckle. My trial preparations rendered impossible by the cognitive and emotional toll of this new information, I put my papers already away. It's handwritten, so sorry, that's just bad handwriting. I put my papers away and began pacing the floor. Having so averred, I saith no more under oath. And I did misspeak earlier. I said Kolinich was a plaintiff's attorney. He's a defense attorney. So just to be clear on that. But that is the style in which Cantwell is now writing his legal documents.
It's a legal filing. It's not a fucking novel.
He's writing it like he's writing it for publication. Very clearly. Like that's, it's, the amused, I reply to the negative. Like that is not my favorite bit of Cantwell stuff we're going to go through today, but that was definitely a high point. A high point. You can find more Cantwell pro se defendant woes, which I've kind of discussed in detail here in documents 1328 and 1329, which I've put in the show notes here. And the one that I really want to kind of give you a look at is
one. The heat was beating down like a truncheon on a suspect's neck. 2. I put my feet up on the desk and turned on my fan with a little bit of string on it. 3, she walked in, her legs went right down to the floor, etc.
And what's more, she was Jewish.
17, forget it, Chris, it's Jewtown.
So So this is him complaining about how he's just not able to access the basic materials. He's not able to access like pencil and paper to file these documents. So this is from document 1330.
Uh-huh.
And these are not numbered. I mean, I guess they're kind of like individual paragraphs, but he doesn't have numbered them. So from USP Marion in June, I restated these problems when I objected to the newly proposed trial schedule. Since then, I have told the court and asked for its help in resolving issues with the CMU in my trial preparations. And now, having borrowed my third and for now final sheet of paper, I again restate the obvious. This is an all caps block text, single paragraph line. This is not fair! Exclamation point. And
it's well known, of course, that things carry more legal weight if you put them in block caps. Lots of exclamation marks after them.
At one point, he apologizes because he never learned to write in cursive, so he has to write in plain text. And as I previously observed, perhaps that is the whole point. Much like the armed criminals who attacked us 4 years ago, these lawyers can't win a fair fight either. For the court to justly adjudicate this matter, either the trial must be delayed and the 14 months of plaintiff misconduct must be accounted for, or I must be dismissed from this case. Anything short of that will make this court an accomplice to a terrible crime. This is like 2 weeks before the start of the trial. He was begging to be for continuance, and
he's
not
just
so
stamping
much.
His foot and saying it's not fair, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, completely on board. I'm sure that like he has a valid due process claim. I am certain of that. Again, not just you, Chris. It's not a deep crime against humanity that your civil case isn't going the way you want it to. He is alleging like this kind of massive conspiracy of like Antifa journalists and like that everyone is just that Emily Gorsinski and various other people are all working together to violate his civil rights to speak freely at the Unite the Right rally, and ultimately this is all just ways of like suppressing his valid political beliefs, et cetera.
No, Chris, no. This is the normal functioning of the system as it grew up over a very long period of time, because its function is to impose capitalist ruling class rule and white supremacy. Yeah, this is not a conspiracy to get you personally.
And so then the trial started.
Yeah.
And I know you've been reading some of these Twitter threads as well.
I have.
I have linked to the first 5 days of Molly's trial coverage, and I will continue to collate those as we continue. So in future episodes, you will find at the bottom, I will, any day that Molly is doing a thread, I'll put those links in the show notes so that I think they should all be available somewhere. So anyway, the first 5 days, the trial is gone for 5 days. I've got all 5 of those here. It is essential reading if you have any interest at all in this case, because even within those threads, it's links back to things that, previous legal filings. Like Molly knows his case backwards and forwards. Like she is the source on this. So they did 3 days of voir dire, picking the jury. I'm pretty sure. So the judge is doing something unusual in that during voir dire, he had the everyone had their questions for the jurors. They just, instead of asking them themselves, they would write them down and give them to the judge to ask. There was at one point a bit of a kerfluffle where Cantwell complained that one of his questions wasn't asked, and there was some kind of mention of like religion, something religion, and it wasn't really. It just kind of, it was apparently just kind of heard. Nobody's sure what happened. I am absolutely certain Chris Cantwell wanted to ask that juror, "Are you Jewish?" Like, there's no doubt in my mind that was what was written on that piece of paper. And that's what Chris Cantwell was absolutely obsessed with finding out before he was willing to accept that juror is, "Are you Jewish?" So 3 days of voir dire, there is an excellent thing that Emily Gorsinski and Molly Conger wrote about this. They published it in Slate. It's called "White Supremacists Have Returned to Charlottesville in Another Attempt to Unite the Right." And it really gets into, I'm not going to read from it. Go read this piece. It is absolutely amazing because they connect the problems with the jury selection process. someone can say all lives matter and be accepted onto the jury, but someone who believes that Black lives matter tend to get removed, because what the jury selection process does is it selects for people who have sort of personal kind of fairness and personal kind of like lack of overt racism in their mind, but it is not correct for 400 years of explicit and implicit white supremacy in the country. Like that's just what it does, right? And so what is supposed to be a very impartial process actually removes people who have significant knowledge about the history of white supremacy, because if you know anything about the history of white supremacy, you are not going to be very inclined to believe these defendants.
Suspicion of movements like Black Lives Matter is just inherently taken as the neutral setting.
Exactly. And Judge Moon, he's a Clinton appointee. He's the judge in this case. I obviously never met him. I don't really know anything about him except for what we've kind of gleaned through this process. He is 85 years old. As we have a gerontocracy among judges in this country. It is a really, really overt problem. Not because there's anything particularly wrong with old people, but it's very difficult to have a legal system that relies on complex technical matters as, like Discord leaks and, Signal and various things, when the people who are supposed to be making these really tough decisions are all in their 70s and 80s. It's just a kind of coherent problem. So did you have any particular comments about what you had seen in the Twitter threads that Molly has produced and kind of in other places, because we are going to talk a bit about Cantwell's opening statements. That's kind of where I want to end this, is Cantwell's opening statement and then the response to Cantwell's opening statements, which you heard a bit of from a podcast called The People's Square with Eric Stryker and a guy named Trey Garrison in the cold open here. They were very happy with Cantwell's pro se.
Delighted, doing better than the professional lawyers, the pro se defendants. Look, I have to say I'm probably being a bit underwhelming this episode, because I've actually been quite unwell the last few days.
Yes. I should have clarified that to begin with, that Jack is not has been not feeling well, so we thank him every day for being involved in this process at all.
So I'm not quite at my usual full capacity at the moment, so my memory is a little fuzzy. I have been reading these tweet threads with rapt fascination and the usual sort of sick laughter into the echoing darkness. I mean, we've already mentioned the fact that Cantwell sort of approvingly brings up Mein Kampf at the very start of his opening statement.
The third sentence goes something like, "If you've ever had the intellectual curiosity to read Mein Kampf, then you know this case is Mother Jones level nonsense," which that is such a Cantwell sentence.
Well, I mean, it is absolutely quintessential Cantwell. I personally actually have had the intellectual curiosity to read Mein Kampf, and I can tell you from the perspective of somebody who has read that book that it has no bearing on this whatsoever.
Except for the obvious parallels to Cantwell himself, of course.
Well, I should have said maybe that it has no bearing on the legal issues at stake.
Right, exactly.
In this case, which ultimately, I mean, he can act like he's sort of in a playground psychodrama, or at the same time in this sort of great moral historical moment of injustice or whatever, like he's the white Rosa Parks or whatever the fuck it is he thinks he is. But ultimately, in the real world, these are legal issues that will be decided on that basis. That's how this will actually fall one way or the other. So, stamping your foot and insisting it's not fair, that's really not going to get you anywhere. And this is what strikes me about so much of what he's been saying, what he said in his opening statement, according to these tweets, which is that it's just irrelevant. it is irrelevant to the issues at hand. It's whining. And the other thing, it has been much commented on. I'm not going to be original, but the absolute shit show of this guy bringing, I think they call it opening the door, don't they, from the TV courtroom dramas that I've seen, bringing into, through his own statement, issues that he had previously fought to get excluded from the proceedings.
Oh yes. He had fought to exclude. I mean, part of the transportation issue was that he wanted to be able to not wear a prison jumpsuit, so he didn't appear to be a prisoner. Like, he didn't want that made relevant in the trial, because it is irrelevant to whether he was part of this legal conspiracy. At Unite the Right. It is completely irrelevant to that, and it is prejudicial. The judge ruled correctly that no, we are going to exclude that, and you can, if you can have someone bring you a suit, you are allowed to, you should wear a suit, etc., etc. 2 minutes into his opening statement, he's like, I am currently incarcerated for another crime, which means it is now fair game. If he gets on the stand, they can ask him any question they want to about the circumstances of that.
As I say, I've seen TV courtroom dramas. He opened the door, Your Honor.
He did, yeah. Jack McCoy is going to be on the case on this one, yeah.
You stand up and you say, he opened the door, Your Honor. And the grizzled, the judge is always black or a woman on American television. So because, I assume every judge in America is either black or a woman,
or a namby-pamby liberal, softy. It's always one of those, right?
The judge says, "That's right." He looks at the defense lawyer and he says, "It's true, you did," and objection overruled, Mr. Slimy defense lawyer. So yeah, it's the other way around in this case, isn't it? So yeah, it's just incredible. It's incredible. He doesn't have a grasp on what he's actually doing. As I say, for him, it's just this great opportunity to stand up and whine and whinge and stamp his foot and moan about the fact that he's being unfairly treated and it's not fair and you're getting at me. And he cannot not bring up the fact that he's in prison, despite the fact that it's in his interest to not bring that in, because he wants to tell you all about the cosmic injustice of him being in prison, despite the fact that he absolutely deserves to have been found guilty on that charge.
Absolutely. I mean, and for another thing, I mean, the reason that he was ultimately, the reason he was even prosecuted for that was Chris Cantwell himself gave the FBI the evidence of him committing that crime.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder there, Chris Cantwell was literally emailing the FBI and saying, look at what this guy did to me, in the context of oh yeah, I threatened this guy, but he was doing a bad thing. And they're like, wait, what did you say? Tell us more about this, this whole incident. Yeah, we're very curious about this, Chris Cantwell. Yeah. They had him under deep surveillance. They were watching him the entire time. There was no question. They literally just, at one point, they literally walked in and just okay, you're ours now. He was done being useful to them, and so they cut him off. It's
this
hilarious.
Guy is so self-sabotaging. I've said he's a bully and an abuser, and he persecutes people, etc. There is a sense, without any sympathy for him, because as I say, he's a fucking Nazi. Fucking swine, this guy, but without any sympathy for him, there is a sense in which he, the person that he spends most of his time bullying and persecuting is himself, because he just sabotages. It's pathological. The man cannot stop self-sabotage. He sneaks around his own home, putting cellophane over his own toilet and tying his own shoelaces together and putting buckets of water and above doing
the Home Alone treatment, but to
himself. Yeah.
Well, he is a deep substance addict. So, he did a whole lot of heroin back in the day. So, he is obsessed. His central thing that he's trying to prove here is we were the ones that we at the United Right, the Nazis, were essentially defending ourselves against the anti-fascist, against this mob of anti-fascists who were ultimately working to work against our own civil rights. And so he's going to, the thing that got him like hopping mad was that there were experts. So, Dr. Blee and Dr. Simi are two, experts in white nationalism and white supremacy who are being brought in to kind of talk about like how the alt-right at the time and, white nationalists use coded language and use various words to mean certain things and how these things work socially. And for Cantwell, this is like, well, no, you're not actually arguing the things we're saying. You're not actually proving a conspiracy. You're just making things up about us effectively. And this is just the standard issue stuff. I mean, I read this tweet thread that Molly put out, and God, I mean, again, I cannot heap enough praise onto Molly for this because it is absolutely astonishing. Like if I were trying to track this trial over a phone call, over a Zoom call or whatever, and could not record it and just had to type as I was listening, I would get so much less of this material than she does. She is like, God tier tweeter, basically. She was literally assaulted at one point. Like she was literally beaten and tweeted as she was going down. She was being beaten. Like, I'm sorry if Molly, if you listen to this, I'm not laughing at the.
We're not laughing at
that.
The
obviously, this is
we are
hero.
It's awe.
A hero among humanity. Molly Conger there. So we played a few seconds of the People's Square episode. We'll probably play a little bit more of that in a future episode. It's fascinating to watch these guys kind of go back and forth about this trial. But instead, I just wanted to wrap this up as just the most perfect way that this episode can end is, what if Chris Cantwell decided to call into a radio show from jail in the middle of his trial? Imagine if that happened.
That couldn't possibly happen.
Silly.
Surely. I mean,
how silly a person would you have to be? How fundamentally unserious a human being would you have to be to think that was a great idea?
I just don't. No, it's not possible. Not even Chris Cantwell. Sorry, what am I saying?
Yeah,
of course he did.
He called in to his libertarian buddies in New Hampshire's call-in show, Free Talk Live. Which he has been a guest on in person back when he's a former libertarian. He used to hang out with these guys all the time. When he went Nazi, they definitely sort of distanced themselves from him, but also not so much that they won't take his calls and bring him onto the show occasion. They're just, well, yeah, you're a Nazi, but the problem with you is you're a statist now. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Libertarians sort of formally distancing themselves from Nazis, but still taking their calls. Whoever heard of such a thing?
Yeah, Hoppe himself, Pinochet. Anyway, he called into the show. He was on the show for about 7 minutes. I'm only going to play about 50 seconds of it or so. But what he thinks he was doing in that opening statement. This is what this clip is.
And it sounded like you were doing your show in front of these people.
Yeah, I considered it a spoken word performance, and I take that kind of thing seriously. Especially once I found out that people were going to be able to listen, because it's like, normally the only record of these things is the transcript, and a transcript, as you know, is an audio entertainment professionally, and does not convey what a person says. It's a completely different. And so I saw this as a tremendous opportunity, both because of the cause at hand and because I knew the world was listening. So I invested some emotional energy in this, and I think it came off well. Especially, all my co-defendants are throwing each other under the bus. So let me just say this: I think some of the lawyers involved in this case are absolutely terrible, and I look like a star next to them. And something tells me I got the plaintiffs shook up too. I don't think that these people saw me coming.
I'm sure the plaintiffs are deeply, deeply worried about that opening statement.
Yeah. No, I mean, you could tell from the reaction. People as he was doing his shtick, people were like, "Oh wow, he's really. I wasn't expecting this. Oh, I'm scared now. This is incredible. We didn't see this coming." Everybody saw it coming.
Everybody knew. I really thought he was going to go full radical agenda at some point. which he did not get to do in his previous trial, in his criminal trial. He was a witness there, and so he really could not really kind of go full radical agenda, although he tried very, very hard. But that's exactly what he did here. I mean, my favorite, one of the favorite things that he says in that interview is he had wanted to at some point, all of this is in my brain now, but at some point he said recently that he had intended to speak really quickly and do his announcement, do his intro, the Radical Agenda intro, as he did it on his show, which was this incredibly sped up voice, just showing how good he is at being on the radio. Yeah, he tried to do this in court on Thursday, was to be part of his opening, was to do that for the jury. And then he got stopped by the judge because what the fuck are you doing here? He said he wanted to do that on the stand for his original criminal trial in 2017. He said on one of those Live from SEG podcasts that he had planned to do that. He thought it was going to be a really good idea. And his lawyer said, yeah, no, that's real dumb, Chris.
You can't. What about the fucking stenographer?
Apart
from anything else,
Right. I mean, so my understanding is that there are no, we will never, ever get access to any kind of audio that was produced here. I would love to. I was not able to listen to this. I had my day job and I just could not sit and listen to the case. I would love to listen to that opening statement at some point. Just out of sheer masochism at this point, because I've listened to so many hours of this band, and I want to see exactly how close he got to a Radical Agenda.
To a Radical Agenda performance. Yeah. This is why for everything, you can't feel sorry for this guy, because the truth is he's having a great time. He's enjoying this.
Yep. Absolutely.
He's the center of attention, and he's getting to show off, and he's the victim, and he's happy as a pig in shit.
Which is where he's gonna. I guess it's worth just kind of wrapping up here and saying, Chris Cantwell he has nothing anymore. He lost his car, he lost his apartment, he's incarcerated. He'll get out. I cannot. I assume he's going to try to go back and be on the radio, do another internet show. But his supporters are, he's got some hardcore supporters that I suppose will still be interested in him. But the movement left him behind a long time ago. Now, they're showing respect to him now because they think he's fighting. But nobody likes him. They know how toxic he is. They know how awful he is. They know how much of a liability he is. He's got nothing. So. Look, suppose, the trial goes through and he's got to pay $1 million or something, just to put a number on it. They'll garnish his wages for the rest of his life. It's not at a certain point, the actual consequences that he is facing from this are kind of theoretical, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's this very kind of, who knows, what's the problem with just sort of fucking around with this at this point? And I think a lot of the defendants are kind of in that same place. It's look, we don't have anything. There is kind of an open question about what are they actually going to be able to do to these guys? Can they presumably it would stop their political activism. That would probably be a condition of the end of the trial, that they're not allowed to do certain things anymore. But it's this, I don't know. It's just such a moment that we're having here, and just observing this. And I feel kind of going through all these documents again and kind of remembering that stuff and rewatching some stuff from 2017. I'm back in that 2017 headspace again. I'm just sort of feeling what it was at that moment. And I have this enormous empathy for Molly and for everyone else who was in Charlottesville at that time, everyone who stood up and fought against this, reliving it. And we didn't even talk about on the fifth day of the trial, on the day 5, Cantwell actually got to cross-examine a woman who was severely injured in the car attack.
You see, for all the laughing I've been doing, that makes me furious.
Absolutely. We try to keep it fairly light here, as light as we can given the subject matter. But the plaintiff's first witness was a young woman, a young Hispanic woman who was just trying to go to school. She was 18 or 19 years old at this point, 19, somewhere in there. She was working hard. She was going to school. She was beaten both at the August 11th march, at the Torch March, and then was hit by the car the next day. She suffered horrendous injuries, dropped out of school. I mean, had to relearn how to walk.
Yeah.
I mean, just absolutely horrendous stuff.
This is the thing, like, without wanting to downplay for a moment the fact of Heather Heyer's death, other people were hit by the car and suffered life-changing injuries, and other people were assaulted in various life-changing ways throughout that day.
One of the witnesses described, this is an African-American man, a young African-American man, on the night of August 11th, that someone was splashing him with liquid, and that liquid appeared to be lighter fluid.
Can you imagine how terrifying that?
I mean, just watching that footage again, like I rewatched some of that original footage over this last week, just to kind of remind myself of what it was, and just watching it, with all the times that I've seen this stuff and all that it's kind of been put into, kind of pop culture, and it's used as this like political prop these days. It's used in like Joe Biden's announcement that he was going to run for president included some of that Charlottesville footage, and like, fuck, Joe Biden does not get to stand on that. That is absolutely vile, and people using this for kind of just blatant, political maneuvering or whatever. And like, these are people who are the plaintiffs here, the people who are actually on the stand, who went through this whole process and then decided to put themselves through this trial so that they could hold these people accountable, and put themselves that Chris Cantwell gets to ask me questions about what I was doing that day and what I remembered after I had a severe fucking brain injury and had to relearn to walk. That person is showing enormous courage. And like, if anything, this podcast is made for people like that. It's made to highlight those people and how brave and amazing they are at the hands of these like absolutely atrocious human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. The young woman you were talking about, the Hispanic young woman, is that the one where Cantwell was asking her about, does she have bias against fascism as a political philosophy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And her answer was, I don't have it in front of me, but her answer was something to the effect of, well, I'm a victim of fascism. And he says, because you're Hispanic.
You're
Hispanic. Well, I'm also a queer woman. It's like, yeah. And I could pull up 1,000 clips of Chris Cantwell saying awful things about Latina women and queer people.
Queer people, yeah. And this is why just them being there was an assault, regardless of anything else they did.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, it's obviously morally reprehensible, and that's the end for now. It's not the end for the people on the ground who are going to have to deal with this for hopefully another 3 weeks, and we get a good outcome, or they get a good outcome. I was not there. I have no stake in this, but go follow Molly if you're not.
Yes.
Go check her out and watch her live streams and all that good stuff. And we will undoubtedly kind of cover this. We may just in the future, in the next episode or two, we may, kind of just put in some, kind of how the trial is going. But we won't do another real episode about this until after the trial is over, one way or the other. So, so we'll see where we go with that. But, yeah.
Okay. So, unamused, I replied in the negative.
Yes.
That's 96. Thanks for listening. That was I Don't Speak German. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful, please spread the word. If you want to contact me, I'm @_Jack_Graham_. Daniel is @Daniel E. Harper, and the show's Twitter is @IDSGpod. If you want to help us make the show and stay 100% editorially independent, we both have Patreons. I Don't Speak German is hosted at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and we show up in all podcast apps. This show is associated with Eruditorum Press, where you can find more details about it. The music was by Loon the Band.